Sawadee from Thailand. I recently published my latest book, the Expat Handbook, a comprehensive guide to living the dream life in Southeast Asia. The book covers the 8 countries in Southeast Asia that are popular with expats. In our modern, ever-changing world, it's common for people to feel disconnected from the country they grew up in and once loved, especially when governments fail to address the concerns of their citizens about the troubling direction that many of those nations are heading. Some of the reasons many people are considering moving away from their country of their birth are the high cost of living in many Western countries compared to Southeast Asian countries because of the high inflation in many countries that pushes up prices of everyday goods, whereas wages and pensions stay stagnant. Other reasons that many people are seeking another country to call home is the soaring crime statistics that are rising every year in their country of birth. There's also an open door policy on immigration that many countries have adopted that's changing the very fabric of what were once proud nations. Another reason people are leaving in droves are the higher taxes that are continually on the rise. The inclement weather seasons in many Western countries also convinces many people to move to a warmer country. Other reasons include the rise of the cancel culture that has sprung up in many Western countries in recent years, and the growing control and surveillance by Western governments on its citizens, as well as the decline of societal values over the years and the growing political instability. What holds many people back from looking for greener pastures is often the fear of the unknown, more so as we age and get more set in our ways. Most of us want security and stability in our lives. That's what most of us have worked for over the years. And the thought of risking that security and stability can cause fear and anxiety in many people. If this sounds like you, it's important to remember the fear often stems from our concerns about the future and the unknown. And these worries typically exist in our minds, but are often quite irrational. Many people dream of relocating abroad to transform their lives and fully embrace new experiences, rather than repeating the same routine week after week, year after year. However, it's fear that often holds them back from taking the initial leap. Living in a Buddhist country, I've learned that the Buddhist belief of doing good in this life leads to happier and more fulfilling existence in the next life. Now, I'm not particularly religious person, and I often question the idea of an afterlife, but like everyone, I hope that it's true. But I've always thought that if this life is all we have, I want to make the most of it and tick off everything on my bucket list before my time runs out. There are many reasons why people from Western countries like myself are attracted to living in Southeast Asian countries, including the opportunity to immerse themselves in a new and unique culture, along with a more exhilarating lifestyle and a chance to learn new skills and find new hobbies. Also, there's the delicious, affordable food that Southeast Asia is renowned for. Its diverse restaurants, markets, street food, all of which is incredibly cheap and nutritious. Another reason people are moving to many Southeast Asian countries is most of them have relatively low crime rates, making them a safer place to live. Southeast Asia offers stunning natural beauty, including the beaches, tropical islands, mountains and jungles, providing ample opportunity for outdoor activities and relaxation. Southeast Asia's central location also makes it easy to travel to nearby countries on a regular basis, immersing yourself in a new lifestyle and culture. Southeast Asia offers more affordable housing options than back in the West, and has a slower, more laid-back way of life that many Southeast nations promote. The warm sunny climate that is found in many parts of Southeast Asia is a bonus, as is affordable healthcare services. I consider myself fortunate compared to many people who I grew up with back in my hometown in the UK. From an early age, I knew that I wanted a life filled with adventure and new experiences, not a mundane life growing up in the industrial town of Middlesbrough in Yorkshire, not long after the end of World War II. And I knew that the life that my parents and grandparents had lived was not the path I wanted to follow. So at the age of 19, I set off to see the world and seek my fortune and make a new life for myself in the tropics. and I've never regretted that decision. If it all ended tomorrow, I know I've led a wonderful life enriched by travel and the chance to experience different cultures, and I've very few regrets in my life. Over the many years of travelling the world, I've come across many people who said that they would have loved to have done what I did, but they lacked the courage to give up the lives that were dealt to them. I always remind them that it's never too late to chase your dreams, as you don't want to die wondering what might have been. I mentioned earlier that I'm from the UK, but I spent a significant part of my life in Australia. And when I retired in 2017, I came to the conclusion that because of the high cost of living in Australia, if I stayed there and had to live on my government pension and my modest investments, I'd lead quite a mediocre life. And if I managed to live to the ripe old age and get the telegram from the King on my 100th birthday, as I planned to do, then my investment money would probably run out long before I did if I stayed in Australia and had to live on my pension and not have the income to do the things that I loved doing when I was working and bringing in a decent wage. After giving it some thought, I decided to look for somewhere to retire overseas. I've always been a glass half full sort of person, so when I retired, I looked at it not as the end of my life, but as a new beginning. I knew that retiring overseas would come with many problems and challenges, but I also knew that I could rise to the occasion, and it was the right decision for me to make to retire to a country where my pension dollars would stretch much, much further and allow me to have a decent lifestyle. I decided to travel to the retiree capital of the world, Florida, in the USA, affectionately known by some as God's waiting room. I tried living there for a while in Port Richey, and while I was there in that part of the world, I did a lot of research and checked out some of the Caribbean and Central American countries. While many of those countries were ideal for retirees, none of them that suited my circumstances. So in the end, I decided to head back east. In hindsight, I could have saved myself a lot of time and a lot of money exploring those countries, since Thailand was always going to be high on my list as my top pick for retirement. My journey to Thailand began over 50 years ago, in January 1983, when a ship I was working on as a chef sailed into Phuket Harbour early one morning, just as the sun was rising over the Andaman Sea. Within days of our arrival, I found myself dreaming of living in Thailand one day. In those days, Thailand's tourism industry was in its infancy and far removed from the Thailand as we know it today. Since that day in 1983, I visited Thailand many times for holidays, but it took me 34 more years to get my wish to live here when in 2017 I retired to spend the rest of my life in Thailand. In this ever-changing world, many governments have recognised the economic and social factors of attracting expats to live or retire to their countries, and they're happy to take your money and allow you to live there. However, Thailand was the best place for me, but it's just one of many Asian countries eager to welcome you, and each country presents unique living standards and lifestyle choices. I've been fortunate enough to work or spend quality time in each of those countries, and I hold a special affection for each one due to their unique attributes. Thailand allows me to explore those amazing neighbouring countries, so follow the link in this video's description to my website, where you'll find all of my books on sale, including my newest book, the Expat Handbook, a comprehensive guide to living the dream life in Southeast Asia. If you're planning on moving away from the country of your birth, there's many countries to choose from, but not all countries are created equal. So make sure you do your homework and check them out in person, so as not to make any time-consuming and expensive mistakes. So thanks very much for watching. Good luck with your search for a new home. Take care, safe travels, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers for now.